Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time.
Today, we're looking at something that feels incredibly personal to most voters, but is actually deeply mechanical. We are looking at the ecosystem of ignorance.
We're diving into Profiles in Ignorance, How America's Politicians Got Dumb and Dumber by Andy Borowitz. And I want to start right at the top with the hook, because it really frames this entire discussion. We're all familiar with the phrase the American experiment, right?
Of course.
It's the standard high school civics class description of democracy.
It is. But Borowitz argues that for the last 50 years, we have been unwitting participants in a second experiment, a much darker, perverse experiment.
And what's the hypothesis of this experiment?
It's simple, and it's brutal. Who is the most ignorant person the United States is willing to elect?
It sounds like a joke setup, but the book treats this as a really serious structural question.
It's a systems-level analysis. We aren't just looking at a collection of gaffes or, funny clips of politicians saying the wrong word. We are looking at a 50-year structural shift where ignorance transformed from a career-ending liability into a supreme political asset. We're tracing the evolution of what he calls the age of ignorance.
And before we get into the timeline, and it is a very specific timeline, we need to define our terms. Because when we say ignorance in this deep dive, we're not just talking about someone who doesn't know the capital of Vermont.
No, and that distinction is absolutely vital. Per the source material, ignorance here isn't just a lack of knowledge or a lack of, say, formal education. It is defined as the refusal to look things up.
A willful act.
A willful disengagement from facts. Borowitz distinguishes between a dunce, which he defines as someone who simply fails to do their homework, and an ignoramus, which is the classification for an utterly ignorant person who actually embraces that state.
And just a quick note on the language we'll be using today. The source text is very specific about avoiding ableist slurs. However, it does use these historical terms and specific classifications like ignoramus to describe this structural phenomenon, so we will be using those terms in that specific context.
Exactly. We are analyzing a choice, not a capability.
So let's look at the architecture. The book breaks down the last half century into three very distinct stages. This isn't a random drift. It's a design. We have the stage of ridicule, the stage of acceptance, and the stage of celebration.
And if you understand these three stages, you understand the core mechanism of modern American politics.
Okay, let's start with stage one, ridicule. This takes us back to, the 1970s and 80s?
That's right.
What are the rules of the game in this stage?
In the ridicule stage, the system is designed entirely around shame. Ignorance is a magnet for mockery. The operational rule is that a leader must appear to be intelligent and informed.
Appear to be.
Yes. If a politician reveals they don't know something basic, or if they seem intellectually vacant, the system, and by that I mean the media, the donors, the voters, it punishes them. It's a fatal flaw.
So if you are a politician in this era and you aren't actually, the sharpest knife in the drawer, what do?
You have to pretend. The operational requirement for a dumb politician in the ridicule stage is to mask the void. You have to hire people to help you pass as an intellectual or at least as a competent administrator.
And the source gives us a really useful framework for this era, the Goofus and Gallant dynamic.
Right, from the old Highlights magazine for children. It's a perfect analogy. In this analysis, Gallant, the one who does it right, is Ronald Reagan.
Which might surprise some people, because Reagan isn't exactly remembered as a policy wonk.
He wasn't, and Borowitz is very clear on this. Reagan was not a high-information president, not at all. But he was a master performer.
He knew how to play the part.
He understood the assignment of the ridicule stage. He knew he couldn't let the ignorance show. He had consultants, specifically a man named Stu Spencer, who is really one of the invisible architects of this whole timeline, who recognized that Reagan was, in his words, a vacuous vessel.
It's a pretty harsh description from your own handler.
It is, but Spencer meant it operationally. Reagan didn't know policy details, he didn't read deep briefings, but he had spent decades on Hollywood sound stages. He knew how to memorize a script.
And the source makes a huge deal about the 5x8 index cards.
The index cards were the primary tool of the ridicule stage. Reagan had his script down letter perfect. He used those cards to simulate knowledge. As long as he stuck to the text on the card, he could deliver the line with that breathless sincerity, and the audience would assume there was depth behind it.
He was playing the role of the president.
That is the Gallant strategy. Performance masks ignorance.
And then we have Goofus, the man who just couldn't pull it off, Dan Quayle.
Oh, Dan Quayle is the tragedy of the ridicule stage. He represents the absolute failure of the performance. Quayle shared Reagan's lack of curiosity and knowledge, but he completely lacked the acting chops to hide it.
So when he was put on the spot,
He looked like a deer in headlights. He couldn't smooth over the gaps. He just blanked.
and because he was operating in the ridicule stage, the system just destroyed him. We have to talk about the potato incident. It feels like ancient history, but it's the defining moment of this era's endgame, isn't it?
It is. It's June 1992. You have the Vice President of the United States visiting a school in Trenton, New Jersey. A young student, William Figueroa, is called to the blackboard to spell the word potato. He writes P-O-T-A-T-O, which is correct.
And Quayle steps in.
Quayle looks at the board, then he looks at his cue card, which significantly had the wrong spelling on it prepared by a staffer, and he corrects the student. He tells him to add an E at the end, P-O-T-A-T-O-E.
Which is wrong.
It is fundamentally, factually incorrect. Now, in a vacuum, this is a minor error, a slip-up. But in 1992, in the ridicule stage, this was a nuclear event.
It was everywhere.
It was on every late-night monologue. It was on the front page of every paper. It reinforced the entire narrative that he was an intellectual lightweight. It became the only thing people knew about him.
It effectively ended his viability as a future president.
Absolutely. The system was functioning under the rule that leaders should know things, or at the very least, leaders should not be visibly incorrect about elementary school facts. If you failed that test, you were ridiculed into oblivion.
It seems almost quaint now, doesn't it? Getting canceled for adding an E to a vegetable?
It does, because we shifted phases. The system evolved. We moved from ridicule to stage 2, acceptance.
And this is where the design of the system fundamentally changes. This isn't just about people getting dumber. It's about the reward structure completely flipping.
Precisely. In the acceptance stage, ignorance stops being a fatal flaw and starts becoming a brand feature. It mutates into authenticity.
So the operational requirement changes.
It completely changes. You no longer have to pretend to be smart. In fact, appearing too smart starts to become a liability.
This is the George W. Bush era.
Bush is the pivot point. He made ignorance his brand. He didn't hide it like Reagan. When he messed up a sentence or made up a word like misunderestimated, he smirked. He shrugged, and the system rewarded him for it.
How? What was the reward?
It signaled to the voter that he was down to earth. He was regular people. He wasn't some stuffy intellectual. He was the guy you'd have a beer with.
And then Sarah Palin took that prototype and just commercialized it.
Palin is the accelerator in the acceptance stage. She realized that the grievance of being called dumb by the elites was actually a powerful political fuel. She didn't need to know the Bush doctrine. She didn't need to name the newspapers she read.
In fact, it was better that she didn't.
Exactly. The fact that she didn't know was proof that she wasn't one of them. It was a badge of honor.
Which leads us to the final stage. Stage 3. Celebration.
This is the current state of the system. In the celebration stage, ignorance is not just accepted, it is preferable to knowledge. The polarity has completely flipped.
So if you are smart, you're actually in trouble.
You're suspect. In the celebration stage, the operational requirement is that smart politicians must pretend to be dumb to pass the litmus test.
The source obviously points to Donald Trump as the embodiment of this, but I think the more interesting examples are the people trying to copy him.
I agree 100%. The structural evidence is strongest when you look at the imitators. You have figures like Ted Cruz or Ron DeSantis. Look at their resumes.
Ivy League, top of the class.
These are men with degrees from Princeton and Harvard Law. They are elite academics by training. They are, by definition, the intellectual elite.
But they don't campaign like it.
No. They spend their political capital trying to outdumb the competition. They use incorrect grammar on purpose. They embrace conspiracy theories they almost certainly know are false. They reject expertise. They are performing ignorance because the market demands it.
It's a reverse gallant. Instead of a dumb man playing a smart president.
You have smart men playing dumb candidates. It is a race to the bottom, or as the book calls it, the survival of the dimmest.
Okay, so that's the what. We have these 3 stages. But this deep dive is about the how and the why. We need to look at the architects. This didn't just happen by accident.
No, there are engineers behind this. We mentioned Stu Spencer earlier. His career is a thread that runs through this whole devolution. He managed Reagan, he managed Ford, and this is a fun fact, he even did image consulting for Manuel Noriega.
The Panamanian dictator.
The very same. Which just goes to show that the tools of image management are universal, whether you're running for governor of California or running a military junta. Spencer's philosophy was simple and devastating.
What was it?
If you can't dazzle him with brilliance, baffle him with bull.
He saw the shift coming before anyone else.
He understood the medium. In the 1950s, you had the egghead strategy. Think Adlai Stevenson. He was intellectual, complex, used big words, and he got crushed by Eisenhower. Spencer realized that the TV age required a performer, not a professor.
But let's dig into the incentives. Why does the system reward this behavior? There's a specific event the book identifies as the pop quiz pivot. This feels like the moment the levees broke.
This is the moment the incentive structure inverted.
Wow.
It was during the 2000 campaign. An unexpected journalist named Andy Hiller decided to ask George W. Bush a pop quiz on foreign policy. He asked him to name the leaders of 4 hotspots: Chechnya, Taiwan, India, and Pakistan.
And Bush failed hard.
He failed miserably. He couldn't name the leader of Chechnya. He famously referred to the Greeks as Grecians. Now, remember the rules of the ridicule stage. By the standard that destroyed Dan Quayle, this should have been his potato moment.
It should have ended his campaign.
It was proof he was unqualified. But it didn't.
Why not?
And this is where the genius of his team comes in. Karen Hughes, his communications director, didn't apologize. She didn't say, he'll learn. She attacked the premise of the question. She came out and said, I would venture to guess that 99.9% of most Americans couldn't answer that either.
That's the key right there. He's just like you.
Exactly. They turned ignorance into a relational asset. The argument became, why do we need a president who knows more than we do? That's elitist. The incentive shifted from hiring an expert to run the government to hiring a regular guy you'd want to have a beer with.
And once that gate opened, the rewards for simple answers just flooded in.
Reagan started this, but it accelerated. The message became, complexity is a lie, nuance is a trick used by elites to confuse you. Reagan famously said there are simple answers. This incentivized politicians to infantilize the electorate rather than educate them.
If you try to explain the complexity of healthcare or climate change,
You are a bore. You are a prig.
like Al Gore,
Al Gore is the perfect counterexample. He was a high-information candidate. He wrote books on climate science. He knew the details. And the system punished him for it. He was labeled depressing or an arrogant know-it-all. The system had evolved to reject the egghead entirely.
and we can't talk about this without talking about the media's profit motive. Because keeping people dumb is, well, it's good for business.
The media acts as an accelerant here. Borowitz analyzes the information age and points out a cruel irony. In the information age, jokes travel faster than information.
It's the soundbite economy.
Correct. The media profit motive relies on engagement. Nuance doesn't get engagement. Conflict and ridicule get engagement. Television and the internet became what the source calls demented henchmen. They boost candidates who are geniuses at media performance, like Trump or Reagan, even if they are dopes at governance.
Governance is boring TV.
But ignorance is great content.
So the media makes money, the consultants win campaigns, and the politicians get power. It's a perfect loop. But there's a narrative layer here too. We have to talk about how they justify this to the public. Because you can't just say, I'm dumb, vote for me. You have to reframe it.
This is the legitimization layer. You have to reframe anti-intellectualism as authenticity.
The source mentions Richard Hofstadter's anti-intellectualism in American life.
Yes, this isn't entirely new. There is a long tradition from Andrew Jackson to the present. But the modern twist is what the book calls the legitimacy myth. This is the idea that a C student is actually better suited to lead than an expert.
The whole I don't want a president smarter than me thing.
Which is such a bizarre stance when you think about it practically. You want a surgeon smarter than you. You want a pilot who knows more about aerodynamics than you do. You want your lawyer to know the law better than you.
Of course.
But for the presidency, the most complex job in the world, the system convinced voters that relatability was a proxy for ability.
And the source contrasts this C student branding with FDR. That's a really important point.
It's a crucial distinction. FDR had a C average in school, but he was intellectually voracious. He devoured books. He was curious. He engaged with the smartest people he could find. The modern C student brand, the George W. Bush brand, celebrated a lack of curiosity. It celebrated not reading. It framed intellectual curiosity as a weakness.
Borowitz calls himself the Ted Nugent of elitism in this book, which is a hilarious phrase. But he's making a serious point about the elitist trap.
He is. The trap is that if you demand a president be knowledgeable, you are branded a snob. The system logic dictates that wanting a leader to be smarter than the voter is elitist. This creates a cultural barrier where expertise is viewed with suspicion. It creates a closed loop where the only way to prove you aren't an elitist is to embrace ignorance.
And this leads to the news-free stunt. If policy's boring and expertise is elitist, what do you do to get on the news?
You create pseudo-events. This is a reference to Daniel Boorstin, a historian who wrote about image. A pseudo-event is something that happens solely for the purpose of being covered. The source gives the example of the Donald Trump-Sarah Palin Pizza Summit.
Oh, God, I remember that. They just ate pizza
Yeah.
in public.
In New York City.
Huh.
With forks, I believe. The event had zero policy purpose. It had no substance. They weren't discussing legislation. But it generated massive coverage. It allowed them to dominate the narrative without having to know anything about governance.
It legitimized them as power players purely through the optics of attention.
It's all theater.
Which brings us to the operational mechanisms.
Yeah.
How do they actually pull this off day to day? We talked about the index cards, but let's go deeper into the tools.
The tools evolve with the stages. As we said, the primary tool of the ridicule and early acceptance stage was the index card and the teleprompter. Reagan was the master of the script. Richard Wilson, a journalist, observed that Reagan has got his script down letter perfect. He was safe as long as he stayed on the card.
But then you have the failures. When the script breaks.
And Bush was the failure of the script. He was so dependent on the consultant's feed that he would read the stage directions aloud. There is that famous moment where he read, "Message, I care."
He literally said the words, "Message, I care." He read the instructions.
He read the instruction as the line. It revealed the artifice, it showed the strings on the puppet, but because we were in the acceptance stage, it didn't kill him. People just laughed and moved on. It was just W being W.
And then Palin. Her mechanism was different.
Palin mastered a different tool, the glittering generality. When the facts failed her because she refused to learn them, she mastered the art of the non-answer. She would string together patriotic buzzwords, freedom, maverick, liberty, real America. That sounded like a sentence but contained absolutely no information.
It's like an AI hallucination of a patriotic speech.
Exactly. It fills the airtime without risking a fact check because there are no facts to check. And when the candidate is too ignorant, even for glittering generalities, you use the Rose Garden strategy. Hide them. Stu Spencer did this with Gerald Ford. Karl Rove did this with George W. Bush. They called it Bubble Boy. You keep the candidate away from the press. You limit exposure to prevent the ignorance from being revealed. You control the environment so completely that the void is never visible.
But Trump changed that mechanism too, didn't he?
Trump destroyed the Rose Garden strategy. In the celebration stage, hiding is no longer necessary. Trump's incoherent riffing, his daddiest poetry, as the source calls it, is accepted. He doesn't need to hide the ignorance because the audience doesn't care about the coherence. They care about the energy, the feeling.
Let's talk about debates.
Yeah.
Because that used to be the place where you had to show what you knew. The Lincoln-Douglas debates were hours long.
Yeah.
Right? All substance.
It used to be about argument. But the mechanism shifted to the zinger. Reagan versus Carter in 1980 is the turning point. Carter was factually correct about healthcare financing. He was explaining the details. Reagan didn't have the facts to refute it, so he didn't try.
What do you do?
And he just smiled, cocked his head, and said, "There you go again."
Oh, 4 words.
4 words that wiped out a factual argument. The mechanism here is that viewers remember the burn, not the facts. This evolution continued from Reagan's rehearsed zingers all the way to Trump's debate style, which wasn't even about zingers anymore. It was about pure dominance. It was wrestling.
Okay, you brought up wrestling. This is one of the most fascinating feedback loops in the book, the kayfabe concept.
This connects to Chris Hedges' analysis. Politics became pro-wrestling. The term is kayfabe, the performance of a staged rivalry as if it is real. In wrestling, the audience knows the pile driver isn't actually killing the guy, but they cheer anyway.
They're in on the joke.
Yes. The key insight here is that the audience knows it is fake, but they ask to be fooled. They willingly suspend reality.
So when Trump lies, or when he acts like a wrestler in a debate, the audience isn't analyzing the truth value of his statements. They're just cheering for the performance.
Precisely. If you fact-check a wrestler, you are missing the point of the show. Trump's island of competence, and that's a psychological term the source uses, is his ability to get attention, and the media acts as a defibrillator. Every time his career flagged, the media shocked it back to life because he provided the wrestling storyline.
It's a feedback loop.
The feedback loop is outrage generates coverage, coverage generates support, support encourages more outrage.
And the voters are part of this loop, too.
Yeah.
It's not just the media. The source talks about political hobbyism.
This is Eitan Hirsch's concept. Voters treat politics like sports. We are spectators, not participants. We obsessively watch cable news, which feels like being informed, feels like doing politics, but is actually just passive entertainment. This creates a feedback loop of batshit crazy fever dreams.
That's a quote.
That is a direct quote from the source. And it's vital to note that this happens on both sides. On the right, you have the Tea Party and Fox News ecosystem. On the left, you have conspiracy theories about Russia changing vote tallies. The hobbyism drives emotional engagement over factual understanding. We want our team to win the Super Bowl. We don't care about the intricacies of the rule book.
And then you have the alternative facts loop.
Kellyanne Conway, the Bowling Green Massacre. This is where the system creates its own reality. Trump says 7/11 instead of 9/11. He invents a terror attack in Sweden. In a healthy system, this would be corrected. In the celebration stage, the repetition of the falsehood generates outrage, which generates coverage, which then cements the falsehood as an identity marker for the tribe.
So believing the lie becomes a badge of loyalty.
It's proof that you're on the team.
It's terrifyingly stable. You would think a system this dumb would collapse. But the source argues it's actually very resilient. So let's get into the persistence analysis. Why does it stick around?
There are three main pillars keeping this standing. First, we have to debunk the education fallacy. There is this comforting liberal belief dating back to FDR that if we just had better education, this would all stop. If people were smarter, they wouldn't vote for dumb people.
And the book says,
The source says, no, that's not it.
because smart people believe dumb things too.
Highly educated people like the Tea Party demographic or the college radical mentioned in the book fall for conspiracies because of emotional and tribal engagement. Rational argument cannot take hold in a culture ruled by storytellers. Education doesn't fix tribalism. You cannot logic someone out of a position they didn't logic themselves into.
And then there's the money. Ignorance is profitable.
Incredibly profitable. Look at Sarah Palin. She lost the VP bid. She resigned as governor of Alaska. In a meritocracy, she would be finished. In this system, she became a media mogul. She got a Fox News contract. She wrote bestsellers. The ecosystem monetizes the celebrity of ignorance. There is no financial incentive to be the egghead who loses. There is a massive financial incentive to be the firebrand who entertains.
And finally, institutional inertia. You call it the braking system.
Borowitz uses the metaphor of the braking system. The assumption was that democracy has brakes. If a candidate is too dumb, and he gives the example of Ralph J. Perk setting his hair on fire with a welding torch, the voters will stalk them.
Wait. We have to tell that story fully. Ralph J. Perk.
Mayor of Cleveland, 1972. It is a scene that belongs in a slapstick movie. He was at a trade expo and tried to cut a titanium ribbon with a welding torch. He wasn't wearing a mask. Sparks flew. His hair caught fire.
The mayor's hair is on fire.
It was a global laughingstock moment, and the voters voted him out. Eventually. The brakes worked. He was too much of a doofus. The theory was that this braking system would always work. If someone was manifestly unfit, the electorate would step in.
But in 2016?
The brakes failed. The system is designed to protect the team, the party over the truth. The institutional inertia of partisanship overrode the quality control of the candidate.
This brings us to the crisis in perception. This is the middle layer. We tend to look at Trump or Palin or Quayle as these isolated accidents. Oh, look at that idiot.
And that is the mistake. That is the crisis in our perception. We view them as characters or isolated idiots. We fail to see them as products of a designed ecosystem.
It's nested systems.
Exactly. You have the commercial media system that needs 24-hour content. You have the entertainment culture that blends celebrity and power. You have the digital economy that monetizes outrage. Focusing on Dan Quayle spilling potato distracts us from the structural reality that the system selected Dan Quayle.
It selected him because he fit the visual requirements of the TV age, even if he lacked the intellectual requirements of the job.
Exactly right.
And the story imperative.
Humans are wired for stories, not facts. A false story like, Trump is a successful businessman who fights for the little guy, will always be a complex truth. The crisis in perception is that we are trying to fight stories with fact checks. It doesn't work. You fight a story with a better story.
So bringing it to the present day, what are the implications right now?
Well, the celebration stage logic is now fully entrenched. Ignorance is no longer a liability. It is a litmus test for loyalty. If you admit that climate change is real or that the election wasn't stolen, you are signaling that you are not part of the tribe. You are elitist.
So smart politicians have to play dumb just to survive a primary.
That is the status quo. And regarding the braking system, The source analyzes the 2020 election. The brakes worked, but barely. And they didn't work because of the voters in the abstract. They worked because of local officials, volunteers, and deep canvassing. People on the ground.
The brakes are in ragged condition.
Very ragged. We are driving a car with failing brakes down a very steep mountain.
So where does that leave us? I mean, it feels a bit bleak. We've devolved from ridicule all the way to celebration.
The source ends on a provocative thought. History isn't a straight line. We went from the glory of Rome to the Dark Ages and then to the Renaissance. The bar can always go lower, yes, but the system can reverse.
But not through political hobbyism. Not through watching cable news.
No, watching cable news and tweeting isn't breaking. That's just shouting at the dashboard. The only thing that reverses the entropy is deep canvassing, structural engagement, connecting with people on a story level, not a fact-check level. We have to become better storytellers than the ignoramuses.
We had to fix the brakes ourselves.
Precisely. We have to stop being spectators in the perverse experiment and start running the lab.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind crisis and perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon.
For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer link in the description.
If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.